Hi there, and welcome to Her Season of Strength, where women over 40 reclaim their bodies, their energy, and their voices without apologies. I'm Kim Duffy, registered dietitian, personal trainer, mom, and your biggest hype woman when it comes to aging like you mean it. This show isn't about chasing skinny or counting wrinkles. It's about building real strength, physical, emotional, and hormonal. Each week, I'll share straight-talking nutrition tips, sustainable fitness strategies, and conversations that help you feel powerful in your skin once again. Menopause isn't an ending, it's only the beginning. This is your season of strength. Hello, and welcome back to Her Season of Strength. I am so happy you're here, and thanks for taking just a couple minutes to listen in. So today I wanted to talk about something that's stirred up a lot of opinions lately, and that is the new food guide pyramid. Yes, that pyramid. A little different than the one that many of us grew up with. You think about the one from the 1990s, the one that told us to base our diets on bread and cereal and be scared of fat and quietly judge ourselves for eating butter. Because recently RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., made changes to that old food guide pyramid that flip, literally, a lot of the messaging on its head. And depending on what corner of the internet you're in, it's either being celebrated as long overdue or criticized as reckless. So today we're going to slow this way down. I want to walk you through what actually changed between these two pyramids, what surprisingly stayed the same, and where I have concerns, especially for women like us in midlife. So no fear-mongering, no extremes, just a little context and clarity. So let's first go back and refresh your memories on that original food guide pyramid. So let's start with what most of us were taught. That original food guide pyramid from the 1990s was a standard pyramid, right? One that actually had a base and then it was larger at the bottom, got smaller at the top. So it had grains at the base, and that was your bread, your cereal, your rice, your pasta. And it recommended 6 to 11 servings. And then the next level up would be your fruits and vegetables, right? So it recommended 2 to 4 servings of fruits and 3 to 5 servings of vegetables a day. The next step up, and it's getting skinnier as we go up, is your proteins and dairy, and it's recommending 2 to 3 servings of each of those groups. And the very top are your fats and sweets. And basically it says, eat sparingly. And, kind of underneath there, and maybe feel a little guilty about it, right? So later we moved to My Plate, which tried to kind of simplify things and make, so that you can just look at this plate and think about just kind of balance and portions. Half your plate, you fill it with fruits and vegetables. A quarter of your plate, you put some protein on there. A quarter of your plate, you put some grains on there, and maybe you have, a glass of milk or some dairy on the side. And that framework kind of shaped our school lunches, really shaped, like what we've taught almost up to current days, shaped nutrition advice, and honestly just, kind of created a little bit of confusion because it was very basic, which I personally, as a dietitian, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So now let's enter the updated guidance under RFK Jr. The visual emphasis is very different because, first of all, that pyramid is upside down. So it is balanced on the little point on the very bottom. And protein is front and center. Protein is at the top, the base, but it's the base that's at the top of the pyramid, right? So saying really encouraging protein and animal proteins, emphasizing those more than ever. Emphasizing whole fat dairy, saying, basically we don't need to avoid this anymore. Healthy fats are highlighted instead of feared, right? And grains, while still included, are no longer that foundation. There's also a very strong push towards real food, which, hey, I'm all for that, right? And a clear call out to reduce the ultra-processed foods and the added sugars. Okay, so those, ultra processed flours, white flours, things that basically are really quickly and easily digestible, right? Causing blood sugar spikes. So on the surface, a lot of people hear this and they think, finally, this is great. Someone said it. And I can see why that resonates. But here's what hasn't changed, even if social media makes it sound like everything did. Fruits and veggies are still essential. Added sugars are still a problem. Ultra-processed foods are still discouraged, and whole foods still win. And technically, the recommendations around saturated fat intake have not been removed. They just kind of softened them and said, oh, wait, maybe they're not quite as bad as we thought that they were. And that distinction matters. So where I start to have some concerns here is, as a dietitian who works with, menopausal women every single day, here's what gives me a little pause. Not to mention, being a woman I'm almost 55 years old, right? Some things that we need to watch with increasing risk of cardiovascular disease is that increased emphasis on saturated fats and animal products without enough nuance. Because many women, we're seeing in midlife, we're seeing our cholesterols get a little higher. We're seeing that our cardiovascular risk factors are getting higher. We can see increased inflammation. We can start to see that we have increased digestive issues. So when we hear people say that butter is back or eat more red meat without context, it can quickly turn into an overcorrection, right? Second, that the push towards full-fat dairy. For some women, this feels great. For others, it can increase things like bloating or reflux. It can increase our cholesterol numbers because that's one thing they may have kind of stopped worrying as much about the cholesterol specifically in food, but they still have stuck, cardiologists and the cardiovascular community have still stuck with the fact that a diet high in saturated fat does increase our risk of cardiovascular disease. Okay. So this new food guide pyramid, it's not necessarily a one size fits all. And then one other piece that I want to touch on is the more relaxed tone around alcohol. Because we had been kind of moving forward towards understanding that alcohol can increase risk factors of many things. It can increase inflammation in the body. It can increase risks of some cancers, especially like breast cancer, which, most commonly in women. And now it's just kind of like, oh yeah, don't drink a lot of alcohol, but really not a lot of guidance around it. So loosening that messaging kind of worries me a little, not because women need rules, just because it's important for us to have real, honest information based off of research. And then finally, the visual messaging. When protein and fats dominate the pyramid visually, it's easy for people to prioritize fiber, plants, and balance, which we know are essential to gut health. Balance is what most women are missing, not just protein alone. Although protein is very important, but I do think that where you're getting your protein is also very important. I think as much as we can choose those leaner sources, versus at the top left corner of the new food guide pyramid, it has this big old steak with, that big old thing of fat around the sides of it. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's a great, that T-bone or whatever, it would give you, a couple days worth of your total fat intake. Anyway, so here's the takeaway I really want you to hear. Nutrition guidance, it's always going to evolve. In all the years I've been a dietitian, it's, it has been all over the place, whether it's the 4 food groups or the food guide pyramid or the My Plate or, all the different diets or fads or whatever that we've gone through. But headlines will also be all over the place. And extremes will always sell because people are wanting that new shiny thing, right? That new magic pill, that, oh, you know what? This must be the answer to blah, to whatever, right? This new type of diet or this new way of eating. But your body doesn't need the newest pyramid. It needs just consistency and balance and the things that I'm constantly talking about. You know, it's key to nourish your body, fuel your body in a way that actually works for you, especially for us in midlife. We want to fuel our body in a way that decreases our risk of cardiovascular disease because we know that increases after we hit menopause. We want to eat in a way that balances our blood sugars because we know when our blood sugars are all over the place, that's going to increase inflammation. We want to, eat in a way that's going to promote long-term energy. We don't need these ups and downs that are going to make our irritability worse or make hot flashes worse. So it's important to take this with a grain of salt, and obviously always go with what your dietitian or your doctor is telling you. That's specifically based on your medical history and your body. So right now, we are actually heading into the Fit After 50 season. So whether it's a new food pyramid or it's, some kind of bold headline that everybody's talking about or the latest nutrition trend, I just want you to remember this. You don't need to overhaul your life every time the guidance shifts. You need information, research, context, and just a plan that honors your body and everything that it specifically needs. If this episode was helpful, I'd love for you to leave a rating or review, share it with a friend, or message me with your thoughts. I would greatly appreciate it. I promise you, I read them all. And we are heading into our Fit After 50 program that's going to be starting February 23rd. If you are on the interest list, you will get the best discounts and the best bonuses. It is no obligation. So if it's something that you want to know more about, or if you're just thinking about how you'd really love a solid 8-week program that just helps to teach you about the best way to nourish your body and the best way to move your body and strengthen it for, that long-term energy, that long-term strength, that long-term quality of life, which is so important as we get older. I will be opening early registration for the Fit After 50 Plus waitlist on Monday, February 9th. So being on the waitlist is completely no obligation, but it does come with some perks. You get the best discounts, you get the best early action bonuses, and you get first access before the doors open to the public. So if you want to be on that interest list, I'll put the link right in the show notes. Easy, no pressure, just an option if it feels aligned with your goals. So remember, this is about progress over perfection. We're in this for the long haul, and this is your season of strength. Have a fantastic